The moment Zachary Grant walked into Zara Coleman's office with his fiancée hanging on his arm, Zara knew this would be the wedding that either made or broke her fledgling planning business. "Thank you for seeing us on such short notice," Zachary said, his deep voice filling the small space. He was tall, probably 6'3", with dark hair swept back from a strong, featured face and eyes the color of storm clouds. His suit looked expensive, tailored perfectly to his broad shoulders. The blonde woman beside him, Victoria, wore a dress that probably cost more than Zara's monthly rent. "Of course," Zara replied, smoothing down her pencil skirt as she gestured to the chairs across from her desk. "Congratulations on your engagement. When are you thinking for the wedding?" Victoria spoke first, her voice high and thin. "6 months. June 15th. I know it's tight, but Zachary's been so busy with the company expansion that we kept putting off the planning. Now we really need to get moving." Zara pulled out her tablet, fingers already flying across the screen. "June 15th is doable. Tell me about your vision. What kind of wedding are you imagining?" For the next hour, Victoria talked almost non-stop about crystal chandeliers, white doves, ice sculptures, and a guest list that topped 400 people. Zachary sat quietly beside her, occasionally glancing at his phone, his jaw tight. Zara noticed he barely contributed to the conversation, only nodding when Victoria looked at him for approval. "This all sounds beautiful," Zara said carefully. "I'll put together a preliminary budget and some venue options. Can I ask what your budget range is?" "Money isn't an issue," Zachary said, speaking up for the first time in 20 minutes. "Whatever Victoria wants." Victoria beamed at him, squeezing his hand. "See, this is why I love you. You're so generous." Something flickered across Zachary's face, too quick for Zara to identify. She made a note on her tablet and smiled professionally. "Wonderful. I'll have some options for you by early next week. Can we schedule a follow-up?" They agreed on Tuesday at 3, and Zara walked them out. As Victoria headed toward the elevator, already on her phone, Zachary paused. "Thank you, Miss Coleman. I've heard good things about your work. Please call me Zara, and I'll do everything I can to make this perfect." He held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary, and Zara felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. Then he nodded and followed Victoria to the elevator, leaving Zara standing in her doorway wondering why her heart was beating so fast. Over the next 2 weeks, Zara threw herself into planning the Grant Morrison wedding. She toured venues, met with caterers, and created elaborate mood boards. But the more she worked on it, the more something felt off. Victoria's vision was extravagant but cold, all flash and no warmth. When Zara suggested personal touches, like incorporating something meaningful to the couple, Victoria waved her off. "We don't need all that sentimental stuff," Victoria said during their third meeting, Zachary notably absent this time. "I want it to look like something out of a magazine. That's what matters." Zara bit her tongue and made notes. It was not her place to judge. She was being paid to execute a vision, not impose her own values. The first crack appeared 3 weeks into the planning. Zara was at the Botanical Gardens, her top venue choice, doing a final walkthrough when her phone rang. Zachary's name flashed on the screen. "Hello." "Zara, it's Zachary Grant. I apologize for the late notice, but Victoria can't make our meeting tomorrow. Work emergency. Would you be available to meet with just me instead? I should probably be more involved anyway." "Of course. Same time. Actually, would you mind meeting at my office?" "I have back-to-back meetings all day. I can carve out an hour at 2. She agreed and spent the next day trying not to overthink why her stomach was doing flips. It was just a meeting, a professional meeting with a client. The fact that she had changed her outfit 3 times that morning meant nothing. Zachary's office was in one of the newer high-rises downtown, all glass and steel. The reception area alone was bigger than Zara's entire office. The receptionist directed her to the 20th floor, where Zachary's assistant, a kind-faced woman named Margaret, greeted her warmly. "He's just finishing up a call. Can I get you anything? Coffee, water?" "Water would be great, thank you." Margaret returned with sparkling water in a crystal glass just as Zachary's office door opened. He emerged looking slightly haggard, his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. "Zara, come in. Sorry about that. Dealing with a supplier issue in Singapore." He ran a hand through his hair, messing it up in a way that made him look younger, less intimidating. "Margaret, hold my calls for the next hour unless it's an emergency." His office was surprisingly personal for a corporate space. Besides the massive desk and conference table, there were bookshelves lined with not just business books but novels, photos of what looked like family, and a collection of vintage cameras on one shelf. "You're a photographer?" Zara asked, drawn to the cameras. "Was. Hobby from college. Don't have much time for it anymore." He gestured to the conference table where she'd set up her presentation materials. "Should we get started?" As Zara walked him through the venue options and vendor choices, she noticed he asked different questions than Victoria. He wanted to know about the staff-to-guest ratio, whether the caterer paid fair wages, if the florist used sustainable practices. "Victoria picked the crystal chandeliers for the ballroom at the Meridian," Zara said, pulling up photos. "But I actually think the botanical gardens would be more impactful. The natural light through the glass conservatory at sunset is incredible, and we'd save money on decoration because the gardens provide such beautiful scenery." Zachary leaned forward, studying the photos. He was close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and woodsy. "This is beautiful. Why didn't you push for this option?" Victoria had her heart set on the Meridian. "Victoria wants whatever looks the most expensive," he said quietly. Then he seemed to catch himself, straightening up. "The gardens are perfect. Book them. Are you sure? I should probably run it by. I'm the one paying for it. Book the gardens." His tone was firm but not unkind. "What else?" They spent the next hour going through details, and Zara found herself enjoying the meeting far more than she should. Zachary was decisive, thoughtful, and actually interested in creating something meaningful. When she showed him an idea for table settings using vintage books as centerpieces, a nod to his camera collection and her research that he'd studied literature in college before business school, his whole face lit up. "This is incredibly thoughtful. How did you know about the literature degree?" Zara felt her cheeks warm. "I always research my clients, helps me personalize things. Victoria doesn't even remember I have that degree." He said it matter-of-factly, but Zara heard the resignation underneath. She should not say anything. It was not her place. But before she could stop herself, the words tumbled out. "Can I ask you something? And you can absolutely tell me it's none of my business." Zachary looked at her with those storm-gray eyes and she almost lost her nerve. "Go ahead. Are you happy about this wedding?" The silence stretched between them. Zachary stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city below. "I proposed because it seemed like the logical next step. We'd been dating for 2 years. She wanted to get married. I'm 34, building a life. It made sense." "That's not what I asked." He turned back to her, and the expression on his face made her chest ache. "No, it's not, is it?" Zara gathered her courage. "Zachary, I've planned 17 weddings in the past 3 years. I can always tell which marriages will last by the planning process. The couples who make it are the ones who care more about the marriage than the wedding, who make decisions together, who remember what the day is actually about. And this wedding, This wedding is beautiful, expensive, and completely impersonal. It could be anyone's wedding. There's nothing of you in it, and honestly, not much of Victoria either beyond wanting it to look impressive. Zachary leaned against his desk, arms crossed. I should fire you for saying that. You probably should. Zara's heart was pounding, but she meant every word. But someone needs to say it. If you're not sure, if you're just going through the motions because it seems like what you should do, that's not fair to either of you. Victoria loves me. Victoria loves what you can provide. There's a difference. The words hung in the air between them. Zachary looked at her for a long moment, and Zara saw something shift in his expression, like a wall cracking. My father built Grant Industries from nothing, he said finally. Worked himself to death doing it. He died when I was 25, left me everything. I spent 9 years growing it, expanding it, proving I could honor his legacy. But somewhere along the way, I forgot to build a life outside of boardrooms and quarterly reports. Victoria pursued me relentlessly at a charity gala 2 years ago. She was beautiful, connected, said all the right things. It was easier to say yes than to admit I had no idea how to actually connect with someone. Zara's throat felt tight. It's not too late to figure it out, isn't it? The invitations go out next week. Deposits are paid. People are expecting. None of that matters if you're about to make the biggest mistake of your life. Zachary moved closer to her, and Zara's breath caught. Why do you care? You could just plan the wedding, take your fee, move on. Because I got into this business because I believe in love. Real love, not convenient arrangements. And I've spent the last 3 weeks planning a wedding that has nothing to do with love and everything to do with appearances, and it's been eating at me. She met his eyes. You deserve better than going through the motions. Everyone does. What if I'm not sure I know how to do better? Then you figure it out. But you don't do it by marrying someone you're settling for. Zachary's phone buzzed insistently on the desk, shattering the moment. He glanced at it and sighed. Victoria, I need to take this. Zara quickly packed up her materials. I'll send you the updated plans with the venue change. Think about what I said, Zachary, please. She was almost to the door when he called out. Zara, she turned, thank you for your honesty. Over the next week, Zara heard nothing from either Zachary or Victoria. The invitations were supposed to go to the printer, but no one had approved the final design. She left messages, sent emails, and got nothing back. She was starting to panic, worried she had overstepped catastrophically and destroyed her business along with the biggest contract she'd ever landed. Then, on Thursday evening, there was a knock on her apartment door. She opened it to find Zachary standing there in jeans and a sweater, looking nothing like the polished executive from their meetings. How did you know where I live? She asked, too surprised for better manners. Your business address is registered to this apartment. I looked it up. He held up his hands. That sounds creepier than I meant it. I should have called first, but I needed to talk to you in person, and I was afraid if I gave you warning, you'd tell me not to come. What's going on? Is the wedding off? Can I come in? Zara stepped back, suddenly very aware that she was wearing yoga pants and an oversized college sweatshirt, her hair in a messy bun. Her apartment was small but cozy, with mismatched furniture she'd collected over the years, and walls covered in photos and artwork. Zachary walked to her bookshelf, scanning the titles. You have good taste. Steinbeck, Morrison, Fitzgerald. Zachary, you're making me nervous. What's going on? He turned to face her, and she saw the exhaustion in his eyes. I called off the wedding. Zara's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. When? 3 days ago. I tried to do it gently, but there's no gentle way to tell someone you don't want to marry them. Victoria was furious. Threw her ring at me, told me I'd wasted 2 years of her life, said I'd never find anyone who could tolerate my workaholic lifestyle. He laughed without humor. She's probably right about that last part. Why did you do it? Because of what you said. Because I realized I was about to stand in front of 400 people and promise forever to someone I didn't even really know, someone who didn't really know me. Victoria never asked about my photography, never cared that I spent my weekends volunteering at a youth center, never noticed that I hate fancy restaurants and would rather get street tacos from a food truck. She loved the idea of being married to a millionaire CEO, not the reality of being married to me. Zara sat down on her couch, her legs suddenly shaky. I never meant to blow up your life. You didn't. You made me face what I'd been avoiding for months. He sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. That meeting in my office when you showed me those centerpieces with the books, do you know what I thought? She shook her head. I thought, this woman gets me. This woman spent time researching and thinking about who I am and what matters to me. In an hour, you showed me more understanding than Victoria had in 2 years, and that's when I knew I couldn't go through with it. Zara's heart was racing. Zachary. I'm not here to make things complicated, he said quickly. I know there's a professional boundary, and I know I'm probably completely misreading everything, but I had to tell you, you changed my life. You reminded me that settling isn't the same as living. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words hanging between them. Zara thought about every meeting, every flutter in her chest when he walked in, every moment she told herself she was being ridiculous for feeling drawn to a client who was engaged to someone else. You're not misreading everything, she said softly, his head turned sharply toward her. What? I've been attracted to you since the moment you walked into my office. I told myself I was being unprofessional, that it didn't matter because you were taken. But every meeting, I found myself wishing things were different. She finally met his eyes, and I felt terrible about it because wanting someone else's fiancé made me feel like a horrible person. You're not a horrible person. You're the most genuine person I've met in years. What happens now? Zachary shifted closer and Zara's breath caught. I'd like to take you to dinner. A real date, not a business meeting. I want to get to know you without vendor contracts and seating charts between us. Would that be okay? Zara smiled, feeling something bright and warm bloom in her chest. I'd like that, but you should know I'm going to insist on splitting the check. I don't care if you're a millionaire, he laughed, a real laugh that transformed his whole face. Somehow I'm not surprised. How about Saturday? I know a taco truck that parks by the river, best al pastor in the city. See? You already know the way to my heart. Saturday came wrapped in perfect spring weather, warm with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of blooming flowers. Zachary picked Zara up at 6, and she'd agonized over what to wear before settling on a sundress and sandals. When she opened the door, his expression made all the wardrobe anxiety worthwhile. You look beautiful, he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. You're not so bad yourself. They walked to the riverside park, talking easily about everything and nothing. Zachary pointed out good photo spots, the artist in him coming alive. Zara told him about growing up in a small town in Ohio, the youngest of 4 kids, and how she'd always been the one planning family gatherings and parties. My mom used to joke that I came out with a clipboard, she said, laughing at the memory. I just love bringing people together, creating moments they'll remember. The taco truck was as good as promised, and they sat on a bench overlooking the water, eating and watching the sun set the river on fire with gold and orange light. Can I ask you something? Zachary said, wiping salsa from his hands. Why did you risk your biggest contract to tell me the truth? You could have just planned the wedding, kept quiet and cashed the check. Zara was quiet for a moment, watching a family of ducks paddle past. My parents have been married for 38 years. They still hold hands at the dinner table. My dad still makes my mom laugh until she cries. That's what marriage should be. And I've seen too many couples walk down the aisle toward something hollow because they're too afraid to admit they're making a mistake. I couldn't watch you do that, even if it cost me everything professionally. What if I told you that your honesty might have saved my life, not just from a bad marriage, but from sleepwalking through my entire existence? Then I'd say I'm glad I spoke up. She turned to him. But what about now? What do you want your life to look like? I want to delegate more at work, take time to actually live. I want to get back into photography, maybe teach it to kids at the youth center. I want to date someone who challenges me to be better and reminds me that success isn't just about quarterly earnings. His eyes found hers. I want to see where this goes with someone who makes me feel more alive in one evening than I've felt in years. Zara's heart felt too big for her chest. That's a pretty good start. They stayed by the river until the stars came out, talking about dreams and fears and the strange path that had brought them together. When Zachary walked her back to her apartment, he stopped at her door. "Can I see you again? Tomorrow?" "You don't waste time, do you?" "I wasted 2 years." "I'm done wasting time." She kissed his cheek, feeling bold. "Tomorrow sounds perfect." The next 3 months felt like living in a dream. Zachary and Zara fell into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. He'd show up at her office with coffee when she was swamped with client meetings. She'd drag him away from work to explore art galleries and farmers markets. They took a photography class together, and Zara discovered she had a decent eye for composition, while Zachary rediscovered his passion for capturing moments. They kept things relatively quiet at first, wary of how it might look so soon after his broken engagement. But anyone who saw them together could see the connection. Margaret, Zachary's assistant, cornered Zara one day when she was waiting for Zachary to finish a meeting. "I've worked for him for 8 years, Margaret said, her eyes twinkling. "I've never seen him smile this much. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Zara's business flourished too. Word got around about the wedding planner who'd convinced a millionaire to call off his wedding, and somehow that translated into more clients seeking her out. People who wanted authenticity, who valued substance over flash. She hired an assistant and moved into a real office space. But it was not all smooth sailing. Victoria made sure everyone in their social circle knew Zachary had humiliated her, painting herself as the victim of a cold-hearted businessman. Some business associates questioned Zachary's judgment. There were awkward moments at events where Victoria showed up with a new boyfriend she'd acquired with suspicious speed, throwing pointed comments their way. "Does it bother you?" Zara asked one night after a particularly uncomfortable charity gala. "The things people say." They were in Zachary's loft, a sprawling space with exposed brick and enormous windows overlooking the city. He poured them both wine and settled beside her on the couch. "The people whose opinions matter know the truth. Everyone else is just noise." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Besides, I've never been happier. Let them talk." In August, Zachary surprised Zara with a weekend trip. He wouldn't tell her where they were going, just told her to pack for warm weather and bring her camera. They flew to a small coastal town in California, where the ocean met rugged cliffs and art galleries lined the streets. "This is where I came after my father died," Zachary explained as they walked along the beach at sunset. "I was drowning in responsibility and grief, and I just got in my car and drove until I couldn't drive anymore. Ended up here for 2 weeks. Took photos, walked on the beach, tried to figure out who I was supposed to be. And did you figure it out?" "I thought I did." I decided I'd honor his legacy by being the best CEO possible, growing the company, making him proud. But I left part of myself here, the part that knew how to feel things, to be present. He stopped and turned to her, taking both her hands. You've given that back to me. You've reminded me that I can be a good businessman and still have a soul. Zara felt tears prick her eyes. You always had a soul, Zachary. You just needed someone to notice it. That night, they made love for the first time with the sound of waves crashing outside and moonlight spilling across the bed. It was tender and passionate and perfect, and afterward, lying in his arms, Zara knew she was completely in love with him. I love you, she whispered into the darkness, too full of feeling to hold it back. His arms tightened around her. I love you too. I think I have since you told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life in my own office. She laughed against his chest. That's when you knew. That's when I started knowing. It just took me a while to catch up to what my heart already knew. By October, they'd settled into something that felt like forever. Zara kept her apartment as office space, but spent most nights at Zachary's loft. They cooked dinner together, binge-watched cooking shows, and debated the merits of various coffee brewing methods. He came to her family's house for Sunday dinners, winning over her parents and siblings with his genuine interest in their lives. She attended company functions with him, holding his hand through boring speeches and networking with grace. One evening in late October, Zara was finishing up plans for a November wedding when Zachary came home from work carrying a large portfolio case. I have something to show you, he said, setting it on the dining table. Inside were dozens of photographs, all taken over the past 6 months. Zara at the farmer's market, laughing at something a vendor said. Zara in his kitchen, dancing while she cooked. Zara asleep on his couch with a book on her chest. Zara at her office, focused and beautiful in concentration. Zachary, these are incredible. When did you take all these? I've been documenting us. Our story. I want to remember every moment. He pulled out one more photo, this one of both of them, reflected in a mirror at the photography class. This is my favorite. You can see it in our faces, how happy we are. Zara studied the image. He was right. Their expressions held pure joy, the kind that couldn't be faked or posed. I want to do a showing, Zachary said. At that gallery downtown, the one we visit sometimes. I talked to the owner and he's interested in a collection about finding love in unexpected places. Really? Zachary, that's amazing. I want you to help me curate it. Choose the photos, help me tell the story. You're so good at creating narratives, making moments meaningful. They spent the next month working on the project together, selecting images, writing descriptions, and designing the layout. The gallery owner, a gregarious man named Felix, was thrilled with the collection. This is raw, honest work, he said, reviewing their selections. People are going to love it. When do you want to open? February, Zachary said, glancing at Zara. Valentine's weekend. The opening was set, and Zara threw herself into planning it the way she planned weddings, with attention to every detail. But as January rolled around, Zachary became increasingly secretive and nervous. He took mysterious phone calls he wouldn't explain and disappeared for hours, claiming work emergencies. Zara tried not to let it bother her, but doubt crept in. What if he was having second thoughts? What if the pressure of going public with their relationship through the gallery show was too much? She'd seen Victoria around town several times recently, always with calculating looks on her face. Finally, 2 weeks before the gallery opening, Zara couldn't take it anymore. Are you seeing someone else? Zachary, who'd been typing on his laptop, looked up in shock. What? No. Why would you think that? You've been acting strange for weeks, secretive. I just thought maybe you were regretting this, regretting us. He closed his laptop and pulled her onto his lap. Zara Coleman, you are the best thing that has ever happened to me. I am not seeing anyone else. I have no regrets, and I'm sorry I made you feel uncertain. I've been planning something, and I wanted it to be a surprise, but clearly, I'm terrible at keeping secrets from you. What kind of something? You'll see at the gallery opening. Can you trust me for 2 more weeks? She searched his face and saw only love and sincerity. Okay, 2 weeks. The gallery opening arrived on a crisp February evening. Zara wore a red dress that Zachary had bought her, and he wore a suit that made her heart skip. The gallery was packed with people, everyone curious about the Millionaire CEO's photography debut. The collection was titled Unexpected, and walking through it was like reliving their entire relationship. There were photos from that first client meeting, candid shots Zachary had taken throughout their courtship, and stunning images that captured the intimacy they'd built. The final wall was empty except for a single frame with a note. The last chapter, to be determined tonight. Zara was studying it, confused, when Felix tapped a glass to get everyone's attention. Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate Zachary Grant's return to photography. As you can see, this collection tells a love story, one that began in the most unexpected way. And now, Zachary would like to say a few words. Zachary took the floor, and Zara's heart started pounding. He looked right at her as he spoke. A year ago, I walked into a wedding planner's office to plan a wedding that should never have happened. I was going through the motions of a life I thought I was supposed to live. Then, Zara Coleman, with incredible bravery and honesty, made me face the truth. She risked everything to tell me I was making a mistake, and in doing so, she saved my life. People murmured appreciatively, and Zara felt tears building. These photos document what happened next, how two people found each other in the mess of a canceled wedding, how love can bloom when you least expect it, when you're brave enough to be honest. Zara taught me that real love isn't about appearances or convenience. It's about finding someone who sees you, truly sees you, and loves what they find. He walked toward her, and Zara's breath caught as she realized what was happening. The crowd parted, creating a path between them. Zara, I hired you to plan a wedding. You ended up planning our future instead. Every day with you is an adventure. You challenge me, inspire me, and make me want to be the best version of myself. He dropped to one knee, and Zara's hands flew to her mouth. I know we've only known each other for 10 months, but when you know, you know. And I know I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me? He pulled out a ring, and Zara gasped. It was not a typical engagement ring. Instead, it was a beautiful vintage design with a sapphire center stone surrounded by small diamonds. It was my grandmother's, Zachary explained. She and my grandfather were married for 52 years. My grandfather told me he knew within 3 months that she was the one, but he waited a year to propose because he thought that's what he was supposed to do. He always regretted that wasted time. I don't want to waste another day. Tears were streaming down Zara's face. Yes, yes, of course, yes. The gallery erupted in applause as Zachary slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, Felix was already hanging a photo in the empty frame. It was a picture of them at that first client meeting, Zara looking at Zachary with an expression that, in hindsight, showed everything that was to come. The last chapter, Felix announced, is titled The Beginning. Planning their own wedding was surreal for Zara. For once, she was the bride, not the planner, though she couldn't help but be involved in every detail. They decided on a small ceremony, just family and close friends, at the botanical gardens where she'd once suggested Zachary hold his wedding to Victoria. Full circle, Zachary said when they booked it. This is where I first started imagining a different future. They married in September, exactly 1 year after that first date by the river. Zara's sister was her maid of honor, and Zachary's best friend from college stood up with him. The ceremony was at sunset, golden light filtering through the glass conservatory and making everything glow. Zara's father walked her down the aisle, and she saw Zachary's expression when he first saw her in her dress. It was simple and elegant, nothing like the elaborate gown Victoria had picked out in those early planning meetings. But the look on Zachary's face told her it was perfect. "You're stunning," he whispered when she reached him. The ceremony was short and heartfelt. They'd written their own vows, promising to challenge each other, support each other, and never stop being honest. When the officiant pronounced them married, Zachary kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning. The reception was held in the gardens, with string lights overhead, and those book centerpieces Zara had designed months ago. They'd hired a food truck to cater, the same one from their first date, and people raved about the tacos. During their first dance, Zachary pulled her close and murmured in her ear, "Thank you for planning our wedding." She laughed, remembering the title of this story they'd written together. "I never expected it would be ours. Life's full of unexpected things. You taught me that." 2 years later, Zara stood in the same botanical gardens, this time with a baby strapped to her chest in a carrier. She was consulting on a wedding for a new client, offering advice while her daughter, Emma, dozed peacefully. Zachary had cut back his hours at Grant Industries, bringing on a co-CEO to share the load. He taught photography to teenagers twice a week and had published a book of his work. They'd moved to a house with a yard and a studio space, somewhere between the city and suburbs. "She's so precious," the bride-to-be cooed, peeking at Emma. "You're so lucky." "I am," Zara agreed, thinking about the strange path that had led her here. But luck had nothing to do with it. It was honesty, timing, and being brave enough to speak the truth even when it scared me. That evening she came home to find Zachary in the studio, editing photos from a recent project. He looked up when she entered, his whole face lighting up. "How was the consultation?" "Good. Sweet couple, very in love. It'll be an easy wedding to plan." She carefully extracted Emma from the carrier and placed her in Zachary's arms. "Your turn. I need a shower and possibly a year-long nap." He cradled their daughter expertly, pressing a kiss to her dark hair. "I've got her. Take your time." In the shower, Zara reflected on the past 3 years. It had not been perfect. They'd had arguments about work-life balance, about whose family to spend holidays with, and about what color to paint the nursery. But they'd worked through every issue together, with the same honesty that had brought them together in the first place. She thought about that first meeting, Victoria's hand on Zachary's arm, the feeling that something was off. She'd taken an enormous risk confronting him about his doubts. It could have backfired spectacularly. She could have lost her business, her reputation, everything she'd worked for. Instead, she'd gained everything she never knew she needed. After her shower, Zara found Zachary in the nursery, Emma in her crib now, while he stood at the window watching the sunset. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "About how different my life could have been. If I'd gone through with that wedding, if you hadn't been brave enough to call me out." He turned in her arms. "I'd be miserable right now, trapped in a marriage built on nothing real, probably drowning myself in work to avoid going home. But you're not. You're here with us and you're happy." "I'm more than happy, I'm alive." He kissed her forehead. "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "We still have 50 years ahead of us to keep choosing each other every day, to keep building this life we've created. To watch Emma grow up and maybe give her a sibling or two." "Or two," Zara laughed. "Let's survive the first year before we start planning that." "Fair enough. but I'm just saying I like our odds. We started with you planning someone else's wedding and ended up here. Imagine what else we can do together." Later that night, with Emma asleep and the house quiet, Zara pulled out the old contract from that first meeting with Zachary and Victoria. She'd kept it, a reminder of where everything started. The scope of work had been for a wedding that never happened, but in a way, she'd fulfilled the contract. She had planned a wedding for Zachary Grant, just not the one anyone expected. She smiled and tucked it back in her desk drawer. Some stories did not go according to plan. Some stories rewrote themselves in the middle, taking unexpected turns that led to something far better than originally imagined. Zachary found her in the office and held out his hand. "Come to bed. In a minute. I was just thinking about how I hired you as a client and you ended up hiring me for life." He pulled her up and into his arms. "Best hiring decision I ever made, though technically you hired me first." "Semantics," she murmured against his chest. They stood there in the quiet office, holding each other, with their daughter sleeping down the hall and decades of life stretching out before them. It had started with a business meeting and a moment of brutal honesty. It had grown into something neither of them could have planned or predicted. And as Zachary kissed the top of her head and led her toward their bedroom, Zara thought about all the couples she'd worked with over the years. She'd helped dozens of people get married, had witnessed countless promises and declarations of love. But her own story remained her favorite because it proved that sometimes the best love stories were the ones that started where they were never supposed to begin. She'd been hired to plan a wedding. Instead, she'd found a husband. And years from now, when Emma asked how her parents met, they'd tell her about chance, courage, and the transformative power of telling the truth. They'd tell her that love is not always convenient or expected, but when it's real, it's worth every risk. The millionaire had hired her as a wedding planner. Neither of them expected the planner would plan their wedding, but life had a way of writing better endings than anyone could dream up.